Hi, this is Dr. Georgia. I hope you find today's message a blessing in your life. We want to make sure that we continue to provide these video messages for you when you can't come to church, or for those of you who live in a different state, or we noticed recently we have a lot of people in even different countries who are tuning in. So if that is you and you can donate to us, we invite you to hit that donate button just below the message here. So thanks so much. Prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
Now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now over your heart, and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with is that we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe, governed by spiritual laws, having a human experience. We are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe, governed by spiritual laws, having a human experience. Now the danger with that phrase is that often when we see the human experience, that's when we kind of think, oh, drat, I'm having a human experience. But our work is not to shun the human experience. It's to bring it back into alignment with our spiritual being. It's not to shun our embarrassment or to hide our foibles. In fact, it's to bring our foibles into the full light, to share our stories, both those stories that are inspirational stories and the stories of what was I thinking, and all those stories in between. To share them. Improving our personal storytelling ability is what Brene Brown calls the key to rising strong. The key to rising strong. And as you know, last week I started a little series, a little 3-week series on this book called Rising Strong by one of my favorite authors, Brene Brown. It's her latest book, and it's an opportunity really for us to champion the idea. Her idea in this book is to learn how to be vulnerable with ourselves and with each other. And that's the key. Learning how to be vulnerable with ourselves and with each other is the key to getting connection to God, to getting connected to each other, and getting connected to ourselves in this life. This book is not a how-to. It's not a how-to rise strong. But really, it's a call to consciousness. It's a call to greater understanding of the process of rising strong. Her goal is to help us rise from every time we fall down. And I would hope that we would never fall down again. I've fallen down enough time in my life to satisfy any falling down measurement for the next 10 lifetimes. But chances are we are going to fall down again. Because if we're out there trying, if we're out there willing to take a risk, if we're out there putting ourselves on the line, chances are sometimes we may miss the mark and fall down. Her work is to help us to get back up, to overcome our mistakes, to face our hurt, and to keep moving on so that it doesn't get us stuck. So many of us get stuck in our hurt, and we can't move on in a way that allows us to become the people God wanted us to be, happy, whole, contributing, connected to one another. So the way to bring more connection and wisdom, and of these two things, connection and wisdom, connection actually is the more important part. Brown's research says that we are hardwired for connection. And when we don't have connection with one another, when we don't have connection with something greater than ourselves, when we don't have connection with our deepest self, we've lost touch with our soul. We've lost touch with our soul in those instances. And by connection, I don't mean the connection with your barista or your bartender. No, I'm talking about something deeper than that. I'm talking about connection with those people who are important to you, but full connection, deep connection. Connection that doesn't hide from them who it is that you are in the world. You know, one of the things that I promised myself, I was the executive director of the Council on Aging in Sonoma County for 20 years. And as part of that job, I had to go to chamber mixers and other business mixers. And I promised myself, when I left that job, I would never go to another mixer in all of my life. And the reason is because the talk at those things, and I just realized we have the president of the local chamber in the church worshiping with us this morning. I love you and I love the chamber. I don't want to be at the mixer. And here's why, because it's, what do you do for a living? Oh, What are your hobbies? Then you move on to the next person. What do you do for a living? Oh, And it just wears me out. I'm talking about a deeper connection where we really connect with somebody, where we really have a feeling, a connection feeling with them. So why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for us to have these deep connections? She says, and I agree with her, it's because we're hiding from shame. All of us have some shames in our life. And when we have those shames, we make sure that we put ourselves away from any real authentic presentation. We want to make sure that we're presenting ourselves in a way we think people are going to like us. And in order to do that, to be sure that we're doing that, we don't want to really share our foibles. We don't want to share our mistakes. We don't want to share those things that we've done in the past that we're not happy about in our life. You know, we've talked a lot about human spirit coming up, and people have said, as Richard did, this was the best one ever. And I began to think of what about this human spirit was the best one ever. And I'm going to tell you, I think it's because we went deep. And one of the exercises that took us deep was an exercise called, If You Knew Me, You Would Know. If you knew me, you would know I was incarcerated. If you knew me, you would know I was molested. People said these things over and over and over. If you knew me, you would know I went bankrupt 3 times. If you knew me, you would know that I said something really mean to my sister 3 years ago, and we've never patched it up, and it wears on me. I feel so sad and lonely from her. If you knew me, you would know. And as a result of that, we bonded in a way that words cannot express. It was deep. It was loving. It was supportive. It was God to God. It was namaste in that room that particular day. We can do that everywhere we go. We can begin to unveil who it is that we are, because when deep calls to deep, deep will always answer. But it requires us to be wholehearted. She uses that phrase a lot in the book. Wholehearted, not half-hearted. Those of us in this room have a phrase that we often use, that half measures avail us nothing. Nothing. We want to be wholehearted. And to be wholehearted, you can't be numb. See, we numb ourselves from our pain, even from ourselves. In fact, that's why we numb ourselves, because we're trying to keep our pain over there in our life. Brown reminds us that we are the most in-debt, obese, addicted, over-medicated cohort in American history. We are the most obese, addicted, over-medicated, in-debt cohort in American history. Why? Because we're trying to numb ourselves from that which never needed numbing in the first place. It needed to just be brought up to the light of God and shared with other human beings, other God selves in our lives. See, the problem is that when you numb yourself, you can't selectively numb. You numb your pain, but you also numb your joy. You can't selectively numb. You just numb. So for us to be able to have a life filled, that God wanted us to have, a life filled with joy and happiness and contribution, we can't be walking around as a numbed society. We have to get it up, get it out. Share it in the light of day. So the answer, she says in this book, numbness is to become the best storyteller the world has ever known, and to own our personal story. In fact, Brene Brown calls becoming the best storyteller in the world the rising strong process. That's the process of rising strong, to becoming the very best storyteller in the world. Now, she breaks this down into 3 steps. And the steps of becoming the very greatest storyteller in the world is reckoning, rumbling, and revolution. Reckoning, rumbling, and revolution. So let's break these down. I'm going to talk about 2 today, and then I'll end up with revolution next Sunday. But I want to talk about reckoning and rumbling. Reckoning is being able and willing to recognize that you're having emotion, that something hooked you. Something pushed a button inside of you. Something triggered you. And you're having an emotion. And being curious about it. Be curious about, I'm having an emotion. Don't just shove the cookie in. Just stay a moment. I'm having an emotion. What is that emotion? Just be kind of curious about it. And when you do that, you'll start to feel connected in your life. We have to stop and think for a moment. I'm having an emotion. We're not good at pondering. We're not good at contemplating things in our life. And to do that, to contemplate, it takes a minute to do that. And especially true for those of us who grew up in families in which emotions were not welcomed. Until you heard that, don't be so sensitive. I heard that I'm telling you, anybody says that to me now, you ought to step back. I don't want to hear it again. You are so sensitive. I don't even know I have an emotion when I'm having the emotion unless I stop and say, okay, this is what's happening to me now. So the first thing to do in order to be able to recognize you're having an emotion, a button was pushed, is to give yourself verbal permission to feel the emotion. Why verbal? Because we're so good at moving on with our thoughts. We have so many thoughts coming at us that unless we stop to give it verbal, that takes a minute, that at least gives you a chance to know that you're having a feeling. So you give it verbal permission to have that feeling. There are very few people in very few areas of our life. Everybody, in some area of your life, we overthink something. Something you overthink. I don't know what it is for you. I know that if I get a putter in my hand, I will overthink that putt forever. But I don't overthink a lot of stuff. I could do well to think a little bit more about stuff. But we have to be able to at least take a moment, not worrying about overthinking it. Just take a moment to contemplate it, to ponder it. The second thing we can do after we give ourselves permission is to pay attention. Okay, I have the feeling. Now I'm going to give it another minute, and I'm going to really pay attention to what that feeling is. And she says something that was really brought to us by Eastern religion, and that is, take a moment and consider your breath. If you're having an emotion, first of all, give yourself permission to have it verbally, and secondly, take a moment to actually feel what it feels like. And the best way to do that is through your breath, because it will stop you, and you begin to think of what this emotion is and what it is. So the first thing that we do is be permission and then mindfulness, and that is the reckoning with our thoughts. Then we need to, in our story, after we reckon with our story, then we need to walk into it, and that brings us to rumbling. We need to rumble with our story. We rumble with our story means that we get honest with it. To rumble with our stories, we have to revisit the story. We have to challenge the reality of the story. We have to give it a reality check on our story. And we have to ask ourselves what Byron Katie told us. Byron Katie says, look, you want to find out if your story is true, you ask these 4 questions. The 4 questions when you're having a story. And we all have these stories. You ask the story, you ask your question, is it true? How do you know it's true? How do you feel when you think it's true? And the fourth is, how would you feel if it weren't true? If we could teach ourselves every time we're having a reaction, a button is being pushed, because you know very few buttons are fresh. Most buttons simply are re-stimulating something else that went on a long time ago. And if we ask these 4 questions, is this true? How do we know it's true? How do I feel if I think it's true? How would I feel if I thought it wasn't true? If we can begin to ask those 4 questions, we can begin to reevaluate what's going on. See, I had a story that I told myself all my life. My story was that my parents loved my brother more than me. And because there was lots of evidence out there that my parents loved my brother more than me, I absolutely began to believe that story. Now, I learned a new word in this book. It's called confabulation. Confabulation is the process of buying into a story with all of your heart, all of your mind, and all of your soul. It's an unshakable story. Nobody can shake you. That was true for me before I started asking these 4 questions. I believed with all of my heart that my parents loved my brother more than me. And then when I began to really think about it, when I began to rumple with it, I realized that I came along much later than my sister and brother did. And the truth is, my parents were probably just tired by the time I got to the plant. They were done with dance recitals and baseball games. They were finished with all of that. And from that, I confabulated a story that did not make me feel good. And when I could rewrite it, and have compassion for those folks in that instance, then I was able to move on and feel a lot better about my life. Everybody has a confabulation. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's that your husband isn't as attracted to you as he used to be, or maybe it's your boss didn't think you were worthy of a promotion. I don't know. But you've got a story that you've confabulated. I encourage you to go back and ask these 4 questions about this story. You know, she's a wonderful storyteller, and she tells a story about, she's a sought-after speaker, and she goes, she's invited to come and speak to a group that she's spoken to for several years in a row. Well, now she's starting to get well known, and her speaking fee is going up. And so when they called her to speak, she said, yes, and my new fee is blah, blah, blah. Now she said she is a person, and you probably have heard of this phrase, she was raised to go along to get along. You know that phrase, go along to get along? Now what it means basically is don't rock the boat, just move on. So her go along, get along got her, and she started feeling shame. And so she said, okay, I'll speak for the smaller fee. She said, but I will need my own room this year. And the woman said, no, who do you think you are? No, you can't have your own room. We all have our speakers always share a room. Again, go along, get along. She felt the shame. She reacted. She said, okay. So she gets to the speaking, the night before her speaking, and she knocks on the door, and a woman answers the door. It says, come in. And the door's open. She walks in, and the woman is sitting on a couch in their little suite with her muddy boots on the table, on the table. And she's eating a Cinnabon. You know how sticky those Cinnabuns can be? And she says, I want to shake your hand, but I have sticky bun on my hand. And so Brene Brown said, oh, that's fine. My name's Brene Brown. I'm nice to meet you. In effect, skip the handshake. But the woman wouldn't have any part of it, so she took her hands and she started putting them on the couch, wiping them on the couch. I know, it's gross, it's grody, it's awful. She said she was just dumbfounded. She couldn't believe it. And then the woman says, a woman gets up and starts to have a cigarette out in the balcony, and Brene Brown said, I don't think this is a smoking area. You can't smoke here. Oh, that's the rules. I don't follow the rules. Those don't apply to me. She said it was a miserable experience. And so she bucked up, went to bed, got up, did her talk, went home, and we pick up the story when she is, she's home, she just arrives home. Let's see. When I got home that afternoon and told Steve, that's her husband, the story, I could tell he didn't know if he should laugh or be enraged. He went for the cautious support. The kids are at your mom's house, he said. Do you want to go to dinner and talk some more? I snapped back, what's the point? I can't eat anything that will make me feel better. I really want chicken fried steak and mashed potatoes. I need to drown my resentment and anger in heavy cream. He laughed. Delicious. That sounds delicious. Anything you want. But I knew heavy cream wasn't only a short-term fix and would break my tenuous commitment to not numb out with food. So I suggested grabbing a salad at Cafe Express and then making a quick trip to the mall to do some shopping. I can definitely suffocate rage with a pretty new sweater. Steve reluctantly reminded me that our new budget and suggested that we go for a walk after our salad. It was a bleak moment. You can't bury resentment with lettuce, and walking is for talking through feelings, not smothering them. So I stomped into the kitchen like an angry toddler, rolled some lunch meat around a cheese stick, ate it in 3 bites, and went to bed. So after the next day she gets up, she's still enraged about this, and so she goes to her therapist. And talking with her therapist, the therapist says, do you think that perhaps she was doing the very best she could at the time? To which Brene Brown let out some choice words that aren't appropriate for Sunday morning church. She said that she immediately confabulated this story, and it came from her not enough zone and her anger zone. That's what the therapist said. You know, I think this is coming from your anger zone or your blame zone. See, when things don't go well, we often feel that we need to, and we're feeling exposed, we feel that we need to blame somebody else and to numb out to save our grief. See, these tough questions. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, everybody is always doing the very best they can with the consciousness they have at any given moment. Now, they might have been able to do something better with a different consciousness in 5 minutes, because somewhere that bigger consciousness is in them. But at any given moment, when we act out, we're operating with the very best consciousness that we have. We're doing the very best thing that we can do, and that's hard to take sometimes, because we can see how people would be better, but we're not in their head. We're not in their head. She said after the therapy, she said she was so mad at her therapist, she couldn't believe she said it. She said, it's not possible this woman was doing the very best she could. And so on her way home from therapy, she went to the bank. She had to do some work at the bank. And this comes the story from that. I was pulled out of my private gambling when the woman in front of me, who made her way to the counter, began yelling at the bank teller who was helping her. This can't be right. I didn't make these withdrawals. I want to see a manager. I was only a few feet behind this woman, so I could hear everything and see everything. She was an older white woman, probably in her late 70s, and a young man helping her was African American in his late 20s. The man pointed to his supervisor was helping another couple, a couple of windows down. The supervisor was a middle-aged African American woman. No, I want a different supervisor, shouted the woman at the counter. Here we go. She's really going to wait until she gets a white supervisor? I want to get out of here. What's wrong with people? By this time, the supervisor had seen the commotion and made her way over. And as she began escorting the woman to her office, the teller called me to the counter. Can I help you, the man asked. Clearly possessed by the demons unleashed in therapy, I blurted out, do you think people are doing the very best they can? He smiled. Did you just see what happened? I know. I did see that. She didn't like what you were telling her, and she wanted a white supervisor. It was horrible. He raised his eyebrows and shrugged his shoulders. Yeah, she's scared about her money, he explained. Yes, I heard her. But back to my question. This is a perfect example. Do you think she's doing the very best she can? He thought for a moment. Yeah, probably. She's scared. Who knows? Then he paused for a minute. Are you a psychiatrist? He was missing the point. No, I'm a researcher. And I can't really believe you think she's doing her best. Really? Completely ignoring my question, he said that he had seen a psychiatrist when he came back from 2 tours in Iraq. He said his wife had an affair with someone they both knew and had done a number on him. My question instantly felt far less important, and we talked about his experiences and my research for a couple of moments. Aware of the growing line behind me, I thanked him and stuck my money into my purse. As I turned to walk away, he said, "The thing is, you never know about people. That lady could have a kid on drugs stealing money from her account, or a husband with Alzheimer's who's taking money and not even remembering it. You just never know. People aren't themselves when they're scared. It might be all they can do." People are doing the best they can with the consciousness they have at every given moment. And we don't know what's going on, and we can't know always, but we can know more often if we're willing to tell our whole story to people. We're willing to share what's going on with us in our life, when we're willing to have a deeper connection in our life. That's the time in which we begin to understand how powerful we are, how powerful each other is in our life, and how powerful God is in our life. Well, next week we're going to take up the revolution. It's the culmination of doing the reckoning of our story, looking at it. What is our story? What am I storying about right now? Rumbling with our story. Is it a true story? Now we're going to talk about the revolution of our story, how we can come out of it stronger than ever. So let's take this message into prayer. Knowing that there's only one power, I simply allow myself to be taken over by it, by the love, by the joy, by the abundance. I don't have to do anything to get these things. I simply have to allow myself to open up and be willing to accept them, for I can have as much as I can embody. And I give thanks for that. I release this word into the law, and together we say,